Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Asian Vision Dialogue. I'm Sreynou, the host of the program. So, some of you might have heard that Finland and Sweden formally submitted their application for the Nato membership on 18th May 2022. And when they officially joined, becoming the 31st and 32nd member of the Nato, it's potentially marked as the fastest accession processes for the alliance history. So for this episode, we will be discussing the NATO and expansion with the two guest speakers, Mr. Doeun, the lecturer of the Panyasas University of Cambodia, and Mr. THONG Mengdavid, he is the research fellow of the Asian Vision Institute. So please join me in welcoming our guest speaker. Greeting Mr. Doeun and Mr. David. So how are you feeling?
It is a pleasure for me to be part of this AVD dialogues and part of this episode, and for me to express my own opinion on over the issue of NATO and expansion. As we already know that the Russia-Ukraine crisis is a very hot potato, and everyone is trying to help Ukraine right now.
Yeah, thank you. How about Mr. Doeun? Welcome to Asian Vision Dialogue. So how are you doing today?
Okay, I'm great, and it is my privilege to have a great opportunity here to give my opinion on the hot button issue of Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, thank you. So once again, I would like to express my appreciation for taking your time joining us today. So allow me to take this opportunity to start our dialogue, and I will give the floor to Mr. Doeun first to be our speaker to the first question. So as you already know that NATO is one of the most significant security alliance in Europe. Even though being created for a long time, the relevancy of the NATO international security has always stood. So before we go a little bit deeper, so could you kindly explain the history of the NATO creation?
NATO is the most important security organization in Europe, rooted a very long time ago after the Second World War. After the Second World War, namely in 1947, the aftermath of the Second World War brought about the destruction, the losses of life of about 36 million European people, including the 16 million of European civilians. And then major countries in Europe were worried about the security, the revival of the war to come again, as well as the threat by Soviet Union at that time, which was spreading and threatening all European continent as a whole. So the creation of this important military alliance had major causes. For example, the first one is to deter the Soviet Union on the European countries, and the second one to protect or to defend the security in European Union, especially the strengthening or the revival of the nationalist tendency in Europe. And the third one is to encouraging the political integration in Europe in order to effectively defend European Union or European country as a whole. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for your comprehensive response. Well, Mr. David, we would like to know, when people always say Russian invasion is the result of the NATO expansion. So what is your opinion on this argument?
I would like to go a little bit talking about the first time that Russia started invading Ukraine in 24th February 2022. Yes, of course, we already know that NATO has been gradually expanded toward eastward, toward Russia backyard. So we know that Russia is very worried about its own security because after the fall of Soviet Union, you can see there's a lot of like breakaway state of the former and many former Soviet Union satellite states are joining NATO. So that's make Russia worried. So you can say that one of the main reasons that Russia invade Ukraine is also part of NATO expansion. But that is one of the key problem or the key reason that Russia is trying to invade Ukraine. Yes, of course, I already mentioned the first reason, which is the NATO expansion. And secondly, is about the Putin, Russia President Vladimir Putin perceived that Ukrainian government is a neo-Nazi government and is committing genocide against the Russian-speaking minority, especially over at its eastern border next to Russian border, Russian-speaking people. And thirdly, based on the cultural context, because Putin never acknowledged the independence of the Ukraine because on 21st February, 3 days earlier before the invasion, Putin declared that Ukraine is a product of the first Soviet leader, Vladimir Lenin, that he created the Ukraine, but during that time there was no Ukraine country or state. And Putin always said that Ukraine is an integrated part of the Russian people, culture, and political space. So, and last but not least, because of its strategic location, because Ukraine is considered as a breadbasket of Europe and the European powerhouses. First of all, is that strategic location because of its control over like 80% of natural gases exported from Russia go across the Ukrainian pipelines. And secondly, because of its very strategic port located in the Black Sea, which give European access to the food supply from the Central Asia, from the Asia. So because of this strategic location, Russia can weaponize this strategic location against European country. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. David. So let's move on to another question. Let's hear from Mr. Doeun. There are arguments raised that NATO is expanding to other states in Europe, and it is very likely that Finland and Sweden will join NATO really soon. So, what do you think if more states joining NATO? What about the Russia reaction?
Thank you very much. First we need to examine the expansion policy in NATO, referring to Article 10, that mention about the expansion of NATO. It's based on the intention of individual country who seek the political as well as security interest for their own country. And based on the article, countries are free to join that. However, we need to also examine the agreement between Russia and NATO during President Yeltsin leadership during the unification of Germany, that talk about the eastward expansion of NATO. Actually, during that time, NATO and Russia officially agree each other not to expand the membership to eastward. But if other parts of Europe, I think that's maybe okay. But eastward is another problem that, let's say, the red line of security interest of Russia. So actually, it seems that these two agreements and principles conquer each other. When Russia hold the other member from Europe to not to join NATO, it also consider its security interests, while in NATO referring to the Article 10 in order to maximize its interest too. So it is the security dilemma for Russia and NATO security. Regarding Finland and Sweden application to NATO membership, actually it is the view from the two countries that see the political and security interest from NATO, and that far the leaders of the two countries have agreed already to seek the membership in NATO. However, there is also a major hurdle from major NATO member, Turkey. Recently, actually, I think in mid-May this month, President Erdogan also made official warning of two nations because of some issue, especially regarding the accusation of these two countries as the hatchery for terrorists. Yeah, and from what he thought is that whenever the disagreement between these two countries and Turkey is not resolved, Turkey would block the membership. And based on the principle, if any member of NATO reject any membership, it would not be accepted. So the problem nowadays is to address the difference between Turkey and the two members. Otherwise, the membership application of Finland and Sweden would not be realized. And the other point is that it would be the security issue from Finland and Sweden themselves, because when the two countries started to announce the intention to become NATO memberships, Russia also threatened to these two countries the consequent repercussion, like what is Ukraine having nowadays. So I believe first these two countries need to think about the consequence actually before or during the process of the application. If there is no firm guarantee from NATO as a whole, they would receive a consequence like what Ukraine is receiving. So I believe they would take this into their account, whether NATO would intervene beforehand when Russia come to help them or not. Because actually, based on the Article 5 of NATO, talking about the collective security, when any member or more members is invaded, it means the invasion of full NATO member as a whole. So NATO would respond collectively. But the problem is that now the process is starting, right? So here is the important point that the two countries need to take into account. Otherwise, I think unpredictable results would happen to that countries.
Thank you, Mr. Doeun. That's very insightful. So let us discuss a little bit within the context of IR theory. Yes. So I would give the opportunity to Mr. David. A lot of countries have been saying that we are now living in the liberal world, that most of us are expecting to have economic interdependence, shared value, and mutual understanding. However, there are still conflicts continue to have in some part of the countries. So what do you think the reality of the international relation that we are living in?
Thank you, Sreynou, for the question about the IR theory relating to what is happening in the world nowadays. So for me, I am more of a realist school of thought, and because I believe that throughout the history of the world, we can see there's a lot of conflict throughout the year for thousands of years. Like Thucydides has stated, an ancient Greek philosopher stated that the strong state must take whatever it wants and the weak state has to obey. So if we look at the reality of our world today, despite we are living a more liberal, more cooperative, and we have a lot in NGO or international non-organized governmental organizations such as the UN, the World Bank, the WTOs, or IMF or anything, these international institutions are just established in order to govern and to guide the state toward more developing and to promote peace and security throughout the world. However, what the weakness of this institution is that it does not have a strong enforcement or legal mechanism to punish the state. As a realist, from realist point of view, there is no top governmental organization to govern or to punish the state. So in case of NATO, right now we can see that NATO after the ends of World War II and after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, NATO still persists throughout the years and keep expanding eastward toward Russia, and that is the problem because state need to survive, state need to focus on power, so they need to build up their own self. So I believe that in order to survive into this very chaotic international system, state have to be self-reliant, self-dependent, but state can also cooperate with each other in case such as forming the alliance in the fact that for protections, for security, and as well as the social economic development. So state can form the alliance as well. So that is why it need to be more realistic toward nowadays problem, because we cannot heavily depend on these INGO that happen to be part of many states become the member of this INGO. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. David. So, connecting to the previous question, also from the viewpoint from Mr. David, I would have another question, which would be the last question for our dialogue. So, do you think, as Mr. David already said, states have to be self-reliant, but also to form the alliance as well. So, will the world be better off without any military alliance, from your viewpoint?
Well, thank you for this important question. To me, I think yes, it is very likely that without military alliance, the world would be better off. If there were no military alliance, the world would be focusing on development, economic cooperation, development infrastructure, technology, so on and so forth. Yeah, for example, in order to help each other to grow together. But to me, I think it would be impossible to do so, because actually I believe in the realist school of thought that actually the natural people as well as the country just want to grow by themselves, without wanting other country to catch up their development, for example, and they always think about themselves first to get themselves to the tops, while let the other countries or powers behind them. So I think that it is impossible that military alliance would be stopped, because countries just think about the expansion of security to maximize the security, and they also perceive threat from other countries. So I think it is inevitable that the military alliance would grow and grow. However, I think it is like a circle. Military alliance would stop for a short period of time, and then it will grow. And so it is, I think, like a cycle of war and peace. Yeah,
thank you. So how about your perspective, Mr. David?
Yes, as I have mentioned earlier, I'm a fan of a realist. So I think that the world is more, I think for now it is more peaceful if we have more, military alliance, because military alliance does not perceive that the military alliance has to be formed in the case of war or anything. However, military alliance can be served as the deterrent or containment policy, the alliance, that it means that it can in some case or in some level, it can maintain the regional peace and regional security because we have a big military alliance together. So the word alliance is mean a cooperation and to strive for the betterment of each of other states. So we know that the global global security architecture is very threatened and fragile. For we can see the case of the Ukraine, Afghanistan, the South China Sea, and the Korean Peninsula. We can see that even though we have the military alliance, we still have war, we still have minor conflict. However, the military alliance can contain the big scale war such as World War I and World War II. But I'm a little bit more I neo-realist because I'm also believe in a peaceful negotiation. I also want to see the world toward more development as well. So for my own opinion, I think that military alliance could further enhance the cooperation between state and state based on the mutual trust and confidence building, as well as to promote the regional peace and security as well.
Wow, thank you so much once again. So I think due to our time constraint, our dialogue is coming to an end. Yes, so thank you once again, Mr. David and Mr. Doeun for being with us today. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, our program is coming to an end. Thank you for tuning in and see you next time.